Hello, class, and welcome to the last of our series of Fireside Chats. To remind you, the purpose of these discussions is to provide you with some practical context on specific topics we're covering through the course. This Fireside Chat will focus on building a career in public service. I'm pleased to welcome four friends and colleagues who can each provide you a unique perspective on building a public sector career. Each panelist has taken a unique career journey and will offer you some ideas and strategies for building a public health career once you finish your studies. First, I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Mountain. Mr. Mountain is currently the Township Manager for Randolph Township in New Jersey. Since 1991, Mr. Mountain has built a career in local government, serving initially as the management assistant in the city of Rockville, Maryland. He then transitioned to New Jersey, where he served as the Assistant Township Manager in Randolph Township for about 4.5 years. Then moved on to serve as administrator in Mendham Township for 17 years. And he recently returned to Randolph Township as the manager, serving in that role since 2014. So welcome to the panel discussion, Steve. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, so.
Our second panelist is Jackie Dozier. Jackie currently works for the CDC's Division for Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention, where she's a member of the Health Communications team. She joined the division in 2012 and has provided communications support for several high-profile activities, including the 2020 Surgeon General's call to action to control hypertension. Jackie has served a number of deployments on CDC's COVID response team, including serving as the communications lead for the contact tracing and innovation section of the state, tribal, local, and territorial support task force, and as a deputy communications lead for the task force as a whole. She joined CDC as a full-time employee in 2009 with the Office on Smoking and Health, where she worked on the inaugural Tips for Former Smokers campaign and as a member of the media unit. Prior to joining CDC, Ms. Dozier served as a contractor at the National Institutes of Health, and she started her career as a newspaper journalist. So thank you for joining us today, Jackie.
Thank you for having me.
Our third panelist is Captain Eric Pevsner. Captain Pevsner is a member of the Public Health Service Commission Corps and currently serves as the chief of the Epidemiology Workforce Branch at CDC's Center for Surveillance, Epidemiology, and Laboratory Services. Eric brings a unique perspective on career development at CDC, as he is an alum of two of CDC's premier recruitment programs, the Presidential Management Fellowship Program and the Epidemic Intelligence Service Program. And he participated in each of those programs at different points in his 23-year career at CDC. Captain Pevsner also oversees several programs charged with the education and development of future public health professionals. So he has a number of perspectives to offer on career development in the government. So thanks for joining us, Eric. And last but certainly not least, I am pleased to introduce Alessandra Caprias to our panel. Allie has the distinction of being the youngest member of the panel and currently serves as a public health analyst on my team in the Division for Heart Disease and Stroke Prevention. Allie's been with CDC for 4 years. Her first 2 years she spent as a public health associate assigned to the Virginia Department of Health in Charlottesville. The Public Health Associate Program is a relatively new program that recruits primarily undergraduates to serve at CDC at the state, tribal, local, or territorial levels for a period of 2 years. Following the end of this 2-year experience, many graduates of this program transition to full-time employees at CDC, and we were able to recruit Allie out of this program. And I think she can offer a very recent perspective on how to obtain a position in this program and transition into a full-time role at CDC following completion of her associate program. So thanks for joining us today, Allie. Appreciate having you here. So we'll start with a question to Steve, and we'll go round robin. So Steve, in 1960, there were approximately 8 million government employees in the United States, with about 2.4 serving in the federal government and the balance serving at the state and local level. And over time, the overall number has increased significantly to where there's about 19 million, but the federal number has remained relatively static at 2.5 million, while state and local numbers are huge at this point, about 16.5 million employees. Over the course of your career, what observations have you made about the increasing number of public administrators at the state and local level in terms of both career opportunity as well as opportunity for public servants at that level to have a real impact?
Thanks, Sal, for the introduction and the lead-in. Just a couple, and then I'll jump right into answering the question. I think it is illustrative to kind of how I got into the career, but how others could certainly consider getting into the career on the local level. I was always interested in government from the time I was in high school, I guess, but I really wasn't sure which I might get into. I eventually went to graduate school, as was mentioned in the introduction, with Sal at American University. And it was during that time that some things started to become clearer. I did go through the program thinking possibly federal options were best for me, but at the same time was interning at a local government association. And that opened up a full-time position about the same time that I was going through the PMI program. And so I decided to stay with the association, which ultimately led me on a path towards local government. And from there, just went through the career path of the management internship through the assistant role to eventually a town manager position that I have still to this day. In terms of trying to specifically, it is true that the description you gave in the lead-in that since I'd say the late 80s, early 90s, there's been a leveling off on the federal level, and certainly a lot of outsourcing as well. And that's pushed down to the state and local level, more services, more activities that created opportunities for jobs. The other thing that I'll mention on the local level that I've seen in my career is local government has become much more in the last 30, 40 years, what even in small towns used to be more a politically driven and volunteer driven type of service is now gone the route of more professionals in government. And I think local leaders have seen the benefits of professionals in government, and less of the political patronage, and even just elected officials themselves serving in what would be considered to be professional roles has gone away. I cannot attest to state government experience on that level, but certainly on the local level, I think that the level of job satisfaction and opportunity to make a difference is definitely there. In my job as township manager, I interact daily with the constituents I serve. Government by its nature is very close to the people, highly accessible, whether it be through individuals visiting my office, which, believe it or not, they still do now. Even in COVID, we haven't really shut down. Attending public meetings, phone calls, emails, and now even we're very accessible. It's something that even on the state level has kind of gone away a little bit as the size of state government has gotten a little bigger. But on a local level, and we're a community of close to 30,000 here, and people still are very comfortable contacting me, not let alone my staff. You do get to know your community. You work closely with the governing body, with volunteers, and with the residents themselves. You also have a direct impact on those you serve. You not only work on development of policy, but providing guidance to the governing body, and certainly project oversight and seeing things from beginning to end. A great example of that is we recently developed a 90-acre park here in Randolph that I was fortunate enough to be involved in, literally from the property acquisition stage right on through the ribbon cutting, and later level of satisfaction that seeing something that wasn't even an idea on somebody's mind over a several year period open, and to go into that park now and see people using it and enjoying it with their families, is highly rewarding. It's something you don't really get to do in really a lot of lines of work, not just government, but even in business, seeing something kind of cradle to end, into a positive result. Municipal organizations are typically lean on staffing. So what that does is it gives people from a young entry level, get experience very quickly, because you just get thrown into things, probably even before you're ready for them. And I was fortunate enough in early on to have that benefit me, and it served me well as I moved up into positions where I was now in the position of authority to have had those entry level experience. Don't know that you always get in large organizations quickly. You eventually get to them, but they sometimes take a little longer. The other thing I would mention is that politics, although it's starting to change, unfortunately, tend to be less partisan on the local level. You get politics, but it doesn't creep in until the activity of the government. As they say, there's no Republican or Democratic way to pave a street. But that's starting to change a little, but it's still, relatively speaking, not something I have to worry about in my position, although I'm dealing with elected officials on a daily basis. It does give you a great deal of flexibility in terms of where you want to live being in local government, because you pretty much can go to any place in the country and there's going to be opportunities for you. And the work is never bureaucratic or repetitive. Every day is different. I come in with a work on, but sometimes by noon, I'm already working on something that literally came up that morning and will, consume my day. So it makes it so that you're never bored. Sometimes it's a little unsettling because you can't always plan for the unexpected, but it's also, it makes for, and you do get to touch in pretty much every area because of the fact that, as a generalist are leading the organization, but there are opportunities in every aspect of the organization to get involved. So in summary, I'll just say I've enjoyed my career to date. It's been a great experience. The level of opportunities are definitely there for those that want to get involved. And I'll save the remainder of comments about just general advice on how to get involved till after the other panelists have spoken.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I didn't realize you were in the PMI process back then. That makes three of us.
I completed it. Yeah, I completed it and was interviewing for jobs, and then the ICMA opportunity trumped it.
Yeah, it's funny because our paths went in a similar situation, completely opposite direction there, because about 2 weeks after I got offered the job at CDC, I got offered a job in a local government up in New Hampshire. So
That's funny.
I think the most powerful thing that resonated with me when you were talking is being able to see projects completed.
Yes.
Because, for the most part, there are aspects of the federal jobs that you can see those projects in action, but I think the bulk of us really don't get to see that kind of boots on the ground implementation on a regular basis. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing, pretty powerful motivator in a lot of ways for people committed to public service. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on your local government experiences. I appreciate that.
Sure.
So now we'll move to Jackie. And Jackie, your public career path has been an interesting one. As I mentioned, you started as a reporter, transitioned to a government contractor, and then eventually were able to get hired into CDC as a full-time employee. Could you share some of the details of your journey to public service and what steps you took to make that transition to a full-time Fed a possibility?
Sure, delighted to. And And I will say that key word that you just used was eventually, because it was eventually for me. I probably am one of the only individuals on this panel, perhaps that did not go through a public health program to come into the federal government. So my path into public health was full of kind of twists and turns and opportunities. And so when I was listening to the numbers, the stats that you were giving up at the beginning, I thought, well, I'm really, have to taken me back a little, but I'm really not surprised because I've seen that, particularly with the positions kind of being going down over the years. But I came into the federal government at a time where working as a contractor today is much more commonplace than it was 15 or so years ago. So I came into the government as was working as a newspaper reporter in Atlanta and then in New York, and found myself in the DC area and had a background in covering health, which is where I initially became close to public health, but was covering health and covering nations. And I took an opportunity, was just open-minded, took an opportunity with a small company that I was not familiar with, but taking that position with that small company led to bigger opportunities for me because it put me in a position where I found my age, and then later at CDC on site, working with leading scientists and hiring authorities, and something that I can safely say I never could have done within a month's time going through the federal government process. I can clearly say that. Minded, coming from a background of covering health, I of course had the qualifications and skills to serve in that role, but working as a contractor gave me that opportunity to really get in, to be in the driver's seat, to see how the agency worked, to understand the agencies and the priorities as they evolved. And again, we're talking years ago when, working as a full-time consultant or contractor wasn't the traditional route. And so when I found myself in Atlanta, again, where CDC is housed, took that same opportunity. And what it did for me to stand out when I started thinking about wanting a full-time position at CDC, having that insight into the agency, understanding the priorities of the agency at that time. And this was a time that the federal government was for and open to bringing in folks from outside the federal government, from the corporate world into CDC to bring that perspective. So I came into the government during that time, and it benefited me because, like I said, I could not, and I don't know how many students here are familiar with the federal hiring process, but it was a process that you have to learn and learn to maneuver. So working as a contractor, it worked for a lot of people. I know at CDC is very commonplace now, and I was listening earlier when you were talking about outsourcing work that really has become a standard practice at the federal level. Working with contractors is something that all of us here on this panel do on a daily basis. We work very closely with contract companies. And I think what it does, it gives you that kind of inside look into the agency if you're considering a career in public health. And so for me, I say my path wasn't a straight path. I didn't go through a structured public health program. I, of course, had a background in journalism, a background in covering health. I also covered municipality. I was listening when Steve was talking. I board meetings at 10 o'clock at night and going back, following my stories, going into hospitals at that time, talking to physicians and patients about lack of healthcare, lack of coverage. And I will say that all of that, all of those skills, all of that knowledge that I gained during my time to my surprise, I'm still using a lot of those critical, skills. So what I'll say to your students just briefly here is that, when you're thinking about your career, don't underestimate the skills and the opportunities that you have very early on in your career, because you may find yourself using them later in your career, wherever you decide to land. So, and I would say, be open, much like I was. I came from, a field that really was not connected to public health, but I was open-minded, flexible, will look at an opportunity that I would not have, entertained otherwise. But I'm so glad that I did today, because it has led me to a place where I love what I do. I simply love being at CDC. I wake up every morning excited to be at CDC. And it's been the most rewarding. And when I started out as a reporter years ago, never would I have thought that the skills that I gained during that time would lead me to where I am now. So I can certainly say more about that at the end of our discussion. But I would like to say that one of the key things about working on site experience as a contractor, it really gives you that opportunity to learn and grow, and in a way that perhaps you would not do as an FTE, because it also gives you an idea to see across the agency what the opportunities are and where you may want to land.
Thank you for that, Jackie. I think the thing that's struck home for me most was the idea that you didn't necessarily see public health as viable until you kind of got into it and was flexible about your perspective. And I had the same situation for me. So like my students, I was an MPA student, and I tell people I couldn't have defined public health when I got to CDC. In fact, I was in Atlanta in March before I graduated, and hanging out with my cousin and some of her friends, and they're like, "Oh, you should come and work in Atlanta." And I'm like, "I'm going to work for the government. Who am I going to work for in Atlanta?" And literally 3 months later, I'm being offered jobs at CDC, and really thinking about coming down here. So I think that flexibility and being open to possibilities is important for folks, especially early in their career. So thanks for sharing that.
Great, thank you.
Well, it looks like we lost Steve from the conversation. Hopefully he'll be able to jump back on before the end, but I'm going to move on to Eric, and I'm going to ask you a two-parter, Eric. So given your role at CDC, I would love it if you could describe some of the career opportunities that are available for new MPA graduates. And as someone who's participated in two of the more notable recruitment opportunities here in the agency, how were those experiences supportive of the career development that you've engaged in and led to your current role?
Sure. Thanks, Al. So on the first part of that question, as far as opportunities, there's an abundance of opportunities for graduating students looking to come to CDC. And we actually have with this, it's really easy to remember. It's www.cdc.gov/fellowships. And on that page, it lists all the various ways that you can explore based on your interest in coming to CDC, depending on if you have an interest, a particular area or skill set that as you've already heard from, Sal and Jackie, there's a variety of, and Allie was in one, there's a variety of formal programs you can come into. The most direct one that would apply to you is one that I did, and Sal and Steve had the opportunity, but he chose otherwise, which was it was the Presidential Management Internship, and it's now called the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. And that's a great opportunity to come to federal government and be 2 years of service. And normally, if you do your job pretty well, it converts into a permanent job, especially at CDC. So it's a great opportunity to come in, gain some federal experience. And the nice thing about the fellowship program is you get assigned to a position where you're gaining skill and expertise, but you also have the opportunity to do rotations either within CDC or you can go to any federal agency. And the Presidential Management Fellowship Program has, as Sal talked about, he didn't even realize there were positions in it in the government in Atlanta, that CDC or most federal institutions. So you can go work at the Department of Justice, Bureau of, EPA, wherever you might want to be. And NASA, so there's a lot of exciting opportunities to come and apply, the skills that you're getting in your courses right now. The other thing, as far as career progression, I think similar to Sal and what you heard from Jack, so Steve, is the importance of being ready to seize the opportunity. I didn't think I was going to end up in public health as well. I was planning on being a physician like my father and spending my life seeing patients in the Detroit, Michigan, entire life to be. But I ran into a mentor who really kind of inspired me, and I was working with him as I was getting ready to apply to medical school. And he came to me one day and said, I've got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is I've accepted another job and I'm leaving in 2 weeks. I'm going to CDC and they're letting me hire a research intern. And if you want to go to public health school in Georgia, I can hire you for a job as a research intern at CDC. So I was like, oh, this is awesome. So I applied to public health school, not really knowing what public health was, but knowing it could help me get into medical school at CDC. And how cool that, because I'd seen the movie Outbreak and I get to come to Atlanta and wear these cool yellow suits and save the planet. And so I came down to Atlanta thinking that's what I was going to do. And that's not at all what I got to do at CDC. I was working in our Office of Minority Health, but I learned a lot. And then while I was going through my MPH program, I learned about this program called the Presidential. Now, I had no real interest in government except for CDC. And I really didn't have an interest in leadership or, again, I wanted to focus on science, but I'd been working in this other program at CDC and Sal was my boss. And Sal told me all these great things about the Presidential Management Fellowship Program, or the PMI program at that time, and helped me understand how that could be a pathway for my career to all sorts of other things. So under Sal's guidance, I really took on this opportunity of applying the Presidential Management Fellowship Program. And I got into this place where Jackie used to work, the Office on Smoking and Health. And I had this great experience there, scientific skills, and ultimately realized I didn't know enough to have the level of scientific involvement that I wanted to, and I needed to go back to school. So I went back to school and got my doctorate, and then came back to CDC through another training program, the epidemic. And that's where we train our disease detectives at CDC. And I worked on that for years and loved that, until someone that had been a supervisor there got promoted to several positions up, stopped me one day and said, I want you to apply to be the director of the Epidemic Intelligence Service. I said, well, I don't want to do that. I love doing what I'm doing now. He said, well, it's a good experience for you to go through you should just apply for this job. So I applied for this job, somehow stumbled through it, through a couple of rounds of interviews. And next thing I know, I got a call to come and meet with the CDC director, and I got offered this job. So, again, similar to some of the things you heard from Steve and Jackie already, it's really about seizing these opportunities, these challenges, to take these growth opportunities, step outside of a linear path that you might be thinking where you want to go, and look for opportunities to really grow. And which leads me to this next point, the second point I want to make, that you've heard from, I think, already from Jackie and Steve and Sal, and I know you'll probably hear from Allie, which is service. And that when you come, no matter if it's at local, state, or federal level, it's not about you, it's about service and what sort of contributions you can make. And the exciting thing about coming to government, Sal and I agree on very few things. But I think one of the things that does bind us is we've got this passion for service, and we might come at it from different ways. You're going to be coming and working with people that went for service, for making an impact, and those different perspectives and beliefs on things really strengthen the ultimate work in that service that we can provide. And so I think you heard that, from Jackie and Steve as well. And so that's a great thing about entering into government work, is that opportunity for that service. And the third and last point that I'll make is you really just need to be focused on teamwork and being a good person. and realizing that if you really want to get involved at service and ultimately the federal level, I would advise you start with Steve. You really want to get that local experience because that's where the work happens. And you really need to appreciate how difficult each day. I place disease detectives all over the country at state and local public health departments. And their job is exactly like Steve described. They come in thinking they're going to do one thing, but you never know what your day is going to bring at the local level. You got to take on whatever fire is burning brightest. And until you understand how difficult it is operating in an environment like that, often with lists and the challenges you face, you need to understand that before you really get up to the state or the federal level, where you're then working and advising and supporting where the work is really getting done at that local level. So if you think that that's something you're interested in, find your Steve where you live and see if you can work with him and gain that experience that as well, given the role in her program, the PHAP program. So, and the other tangential point, I mentioned about, teamwork and being a good person. From the day you start that job, you need to understand how you conduct yourself can impact your career 20 years later. So how I was conducting myself when I couldn't know how important it'd be 20 years later, when a woman that Sal and I were working with, her daughter is the deputy chief in the position I'm in now. And so when I was offered this job, they came and asked the deputy chief, hey, do you know this? You ever heard of this guy, Eric Pevsner? And she was able to talk to her mom, find out about when I was more of a, a little bit more of a know-it-all little kid, and hear that, there were some decent things about me that might be good for me to work with. And now, that impacted my acceptance and having this opportunity for this job, this awesome career that I'm in now. So again, just the key points I think I was making is think about seizing that opportunity, service, and really focusing at that local level and building up. And the third thing is, working, being part of teams, because you're going to work with people at the state, local, federal level, and being a good person. And those are things that really just, I think will benefit you if you take them in consideration in your career progression. Thanks for the question, Sal.
Yeah, those are great points, Eric. And as you know, I've been involved not only hiring in my regular job, but also assessing presidential management fellow candidates. And I can say with 100% certainty that commitment to public service is one of the most critical factors we look at when we're deciding who to hire and who to bring into programs like this. I think that's an excellent point. I do think CDC is a little bit unusual because we do have family lineages running through the agency. But your point on, being aware of how you're performing early in your career and how that can impact you later on is exceptional. I mean, I think it's really important to set the tone early and you reap the benefits of it down the line for sure. Absolutely. So we'll move on to our last panelist, who's Allie. And Allie, as a recent graduate of CDC's Public Health Associate Program, can you describe your experience as an early career public servant at CDC and how your state-based experiences prepared you for the job you're in now?
Sure. I definitely would like to echo everything that everyone else has said. I know for a fact that as an early career, I take every opportunity and every interaction as a learning opportunity. So if you're learning something new or you're getting to work with new people and learn how others operate. And that's definitely an important aspect of your career building. Like Eric said, you have to be a good teammate when you're in public service because you're always going to be working with people. And keeping an open mind and saying yes to every opportunity that you have is definitely one of the big things that I've learned over the last 4 years. There's no challenge that you should say no to. And even if you can't do it yourself, there's always someone that you can lean on and work with to figure it out. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned over the last 4 years. And I think working in public health, so I started thinking I was going to be a doctor as well. And then I got to school and I was like, did some hospital volunteering. And I was like, I don't like working with patients at all. Like, this isn't for me. And so I wanted to figure out a way that I could still make an impact in the health sphere. and wanted to do. But I never thought that I would come to CDC right off the bat. And so when I got the opportunity for the Public Health Associates program, it was a great way to step into the public health world and CDC, but also get that local and state experience. That's so vital because it teaches you how people in communities actually react to public health or the services that they have around them. So I think everyone said it at one point. You can plan all of these things at the headquarters, CDC headquarters, but once you get to the local level, you don't know how it's going to play out. And so you have to be ready to make changes and ready to up in the community that you're working. Example, I was working on a nutrition program and we were trying to hand out fresh fruits and vegetables to families in a low income community, but they didn't have transportation. So we didn't have a way to get it to them at a central pickup spot. Some people were able to pick it up. So others had childcare issues to make sure that we were able to get the produce to the families. Even though we had planned for pickups, it turned out it was a drop-off program. And so just learning from those mistakes so that you can further use the lessons learned in future programs is definitely key to building your career and the experiences that you have. And I think using the field work definitely, I was in a health department where the floor was always lava. You didn't know where you were going. You never knew what you would end up doing that day. And so I got to see a bunch of so many things that I didn't even think were happened in ever. And I got to learn what I liked and what I didn't like. And that helped me get the job at headquarters later on. So I definitely think one of the big things is seizing the opportunities, like Eric said, and also making sure that you're taking every challenge and saying yes to them, no matter how big and small or small it is, and working with those around you so that you're gaining the best experiences and learning how to work with others.
Thanks, Allie. I didn't mention this when I introduced Allie, but Allie's been pretty prolific about going in and out of the COVID response over the last 2 years. And it's been wear and tear on her, I know, but that's a great example of taking advantage of the opportunities, because in situations like that, it's a lot of work, but it's a ton of experience too. And so I hate it when she goes in because we lose her. I hate it when I lose any of my people, but I also appreciate the fact that she's contributing to the greater good by doing so. So I think that's a great point, Allie. Well, it looks like we lost Steve again. That New Jersey bandwidth just isn't what it's supposed to be. So if he comes on before we end, I'll give him an opportunity to weigh in, but we'll start with Jackie on the closing question. So what advice would you offer my students as they start preparing for a new career in public service, or advancing their existing public service career to the next level, because some are already in public service?
Right. And this is something I could just talk about on and on and on. And I know I have limited time. Everything that Eric and Allie have said, and particularly seizing the opportunity. Seize that opportunity. Don't limit yourself and don't count yourself out. There is a role for you. Your skills are needed. Think about your career. Be open that experience at the local level or in a corporate setting outside of public health is important. Those skills, technical skills and soft skills, Eric talked about the people skills, being a good person. It's always important to have the technical skills to do the job that you're hired. Don't ever underestimate what you bring to the table from your personality perspective, your background, and understanding how to work with people from different backgrounds and different cultures, especially at the local level, and if you choose to work at the federal level. And just be open-minded, be flexible to take a position or to take a path that you haven't thought about. because you really may not know what it can lead you to. So I just encourage you to think about all the various structured programs out there, the fellowships. Those certainly are excellent programs. Take advantage of them yourself, looking and being interested in working as a contractor or as a consultant in a particular area. Take the opportunity, be flexible. So enjoy the journey, be open-minded about where it may lead you.
Thank you, Jackie. Eric, same question to you.
I'm going to build on what Jackie said, and I would just add to it. You know, my position when I worked for Sal was an internship. It was my second or third choice, the ones I applied to, and it was focused on policy. And I really didn't have any interest in policy. I wanted to do science. Took the position because of the opportunity to gain a new skill, and a skill that I knew was valuable, even if it isn't what I loved or was passionate about at the time, and I didn't appreciate the importance of it at the time. So look for those opportunities, like Jackie was saying, to get the skill, to gain the experience. Too often, I run into people straight out of programs or training programs. They're looking for that perfect job right away. And none of us find our perfect job early on. And there's really no perfect job. It's really about carving out the space for yourself and gaining skills, especially early on. Build those skills and then build towards doing what makes you happy. So often people are feeling pressure to do that. And really what you should think about, and if COVID has brought, anything to life, it's, how precious so many things are that we have often taken for granted. So you need to do what makes you happy, because whatever, jobs are hard, work is hard, service is hard. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's difficult. So try and find what happy, build those skills, and it'll benefit you as you move through your career. Because whether it was Sal, myself, Allie, or Jackie, all of us have had all these unexpected turns, and we took on these opportunities, and it's taken us to places that we all feel so fortunate about. So thanks, Al.
Thanks, Eric. Allie, your final thoughts for the class?
I think Eric and Jackie hit it right on the head. Taking all the opportunities and running with them. And it really does not have to be the perfect job. Just using those experiences that you have to learn something and then figure out what your next is definitely how you should approach things. Everything is just a learning opportunity. And as long as you keep an open mind and stay humble and trying to take in as much as you can, it's going to be, whatever you end up doing will be great.
Well, thanks so much to everybody. I don't think we're going to get Steve back, unfortunately, because I would have loved to have his insights, but I appreciate your time. I know your perspective is going to be well received by the class and very instructive as they build their public service careers moving forward. As a side note, what I love most about this conversation is that unbeknownst to you, you have hit various topics we've covered throughout the course of this class. And so, while it wasn't set up to do this, you've been reinforcing some of the things we've learned throughout the course of this Managing Public Organizations class. So thank you for that. I appreciate your insights and thank you for your time. And I hope you all have a great weekend.
Sal, can I have one other thing real quick?
Oh yeah, sure, go ahead.
Quickly, I think that's so important, and you have echoed this throughout your lifetime, and I'm sure others have. For people that are interested in service and you're building towards that, it's so important when you're trying to get into federal service or state and local, is volunteering. If you can come in with your resume showing that you've volunteered, you've gained that service experience, you have that commitment. And a great example of that for his whole life, and that's something I think a lot of people that have worked for him models. I mean, he's had a number of service and leadership positions that he volunteers outside of federal service. And so I think that's just really extremely important. So I just thought that was really important to emphasize, given you've been a model for so many of that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Eric. I think, as a general rule, that's a great point, because when I'm evaluating resumes and looking for that public service commitment, it can take many forms. And we've talked about this a little bit in the class, is that you can get really good experience leading and managing by volunteering. You know, sometimes early on in your career, you're not going to get, you know, the best opportunities to do those things just by the nature of being early in your career, but you can get that by volunteering for organizations in the community. You can build a reputation for yourself. And I think it's a great way to do that. Oh, I think we might have Steve coming back on board, so I'm going to be able to kick it to him for his final comments. Hey, Steve, glad to have you back. That
So
your
sorry,
bandwidth is a little bit weak, but you're back just in time. I'm going to give you the chance to kind of give my students your final thought on starting a public service career and how they can advance their careers early on in the process, particularly at the local government level.
Yes, thank you. And again, my apologies. We can't wait for that federal money to give us better bandwidth here in New Jersey. Couple of things, and I apologize if some of these things were said. You know, my couple of definitely pursue internships. They were the absolute portal for me to get into my career. The joining of professional associations is incredibly important. It creates a network opportunity for you. For me, it was ICMA, it was my state municipal association, other area groups that enabled me to get to know people in the field. Definitely seek out a mentor. In my experience, I had several who were great people for me to learn from, and who, like Eric was saying, I did hear his remark. Those people, they can vouch for your character and your who you are as a person when you are looking to climb the ladder, because they become references. They also become contacts about jobs that are opening up in areas that maybe you hadn't heard about. People are just invaluable in a career. And then the last piece of advice I would share would be patient in choosing jobs, particular job. I find with younger people that I talk to, some of them are just so eager to get a job that they don't really think about the job environment too. And in our at my level, if it's a organization or a community that has a less than stable reputation, those should be non-starters for you. You shouldn't be putting yourself in a position where the support around you is unstable. The other thing is that good managers tend to attract good people. So people who see you with a person who they respect, you're going to get some credibility just based on your association with that manager. And I had it with a manager here in New Jersey who, just by the fact that he chose me to be his assistant, gave me credibility just walking in the door. So, those are things people should think about when they're starting, is don't jump at the first opportunity, jump at opportunities that are good for you, and don't be afraid to say no if you don't feel good about the opportunity. And that would be my gems.
I think that's an excellent point, Stephen. I know you and I have talked a little bit about this previously, but if you're going for a new job and you don't feel comfortable about the situation, then it's probably not going to be the best fit for you, and that's not a bad thing. Finding a good fit is important, and feeling comfortable in that role and being able to perform at a high level is important, and a good environment can be contributory to that for sure.
Yep,
well, again,
absolutely.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it. And again, I know my class is going to get a lot of real good gems from this discussion, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.